Justin Breit and Justin Slaven are known as Bryte and Slavo, and they make up the pop duo Fly by Midnight. The pair first met at a songwriting session in New York and instantly connected with each other. After a few sessions working together, they decided to join forces. They built a fan base by covering popular songs on a YouTube channel and generated over 250,000 subscribers doing just that. The duo then rolled out some original music and found a niche putting on energetic and engaging live shows for their fan base. They've built a worldwide audience for their music, which is all the more impressive seeing as they don't have a record label to back them. That means the pair is mixing music, business, and creativity every day and doing it pretty well. Bryte and Slavo join us this week to talk about being independent artists and the business of Fly by Midnight on this episode of The Big Break. Can you guys tell me your names just so we can organize that?
Sure.
Way?
So, by the way, obviously it's two of us. So at any point, I guess we don't need to keep saying this is Slavo or Justin, but this is Justin speaking.
And then I'm Slavo. Justin is the one that sounds like he has a cold.
Because I have a cold.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's just get started. And Justin, if you want to just talk about where you come from, how you got interested in music, and where this all began, really.
Sure. What I always like about telling our origin story is Slavo and I both grew up on other sides of the country, but we have very similar yet different backgrounds when it comes to music. My background started probably in middle school. I was in chorus, high school plays, a lot of more theatrical stuff. And then when I got into high school, I decided to play football because that was what all my friends were doing. And I very quickly figured out that football was not what I was meant to be doing. And from there, I fell in love with songwriting, and that kind of led me down this road of just wanting to release original music. And I guess that was the quickest version of that story I've ever told. And then
bravo.
Yeah, right. That was pretty good. And then it led me to a studio in Staten Island where I linked up with Slavo, and then we became Fly by Midnight. That's my side of the story. Yeah.
Slavo, what about you?
Like Justin was saying, we grew up in different parts of the country. So I'm from Florida originally, and he's from New York. When I started off, it was funny. I like to tell the story of a jealous brother, because my brother had a drum set a year before I got a guitar, and I used that as leverage to get a guitar. And so once I got a guitar, then it was this thing where we both used to just kind of jam out. And then he started the band. Being 3 years older than me, it was not cool to have your little brother in the band. So I used to beg him to be a part of this little punk scene that he was a part of. And I finally got in, and we used to do bar gigs and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got started. It's funny because I transitioned from doing this screamo emo music to pop stuff pretty quick when I moved to New York. It was kind of an easy transition, surprisingly. You know what I mean? I feel like it would have been a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Justin at the studio, like you said. Yeah, the rest is kind of history from there.
It's pretty funny how we both kind of, Slavo with screamo music and me kind of more theater, both kind of fell in love with music on different spectrums and different genres. And we kind of, I don't think there's much screamo or theater in our music anymore.
No, not really.
But there's definitely influences of other music that we kind of grew up listening to. Yeah.
I was going to add too, ironically, I was heavily into football, and I started high school football for 3 years, and I did a year of college. So I was on the other spectrum of Justin with that too. So we're very similar in a lot of ways, but it's funny how our stories are kind of different as far as music goes.
He was good at football, and I was good at sitting on the bench. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take long to figure out that maybe football is not your sport. Probably a couple practices in, and you're there. Cool. So you guys, Justin, obviously you kind of had this idea of music, and you were playing bar gigs. But did you two think as music of as a career when you're growing up, you were teens, in your teens, or in college, if you went to school? Did you think oh, this is going to be how I make a living, or is it more of a hobby that kind of went from there?
Yeah. When did you figure it out? Yeah.
For me, it's funny because I got into doing the engineering side of things when we had a band, and we just used to do a lot of self-recording stuff. So for me, I started getting serious about that. I was all right, so maybe my future is going to be doing the whole recording side of things and working in studios, which I guess still is how it is, being that I produce on the project and stuff. But yeah, I guess that's kind of where it started. I got really heavily into that, and then it just kind of became a passion. So,
and I remember when I was in high school, I think it was junior year, I uploaded my first video on YouTube. And at the time I was working part-time as a pool boy at like a local pool store. And I remember receiving money from YouTube and thinking like, wow, this is more money than I'm making at my part-time job. And it was kind of like that moment for me where I was like, I could totally just like press the gas on this and do this full time. And it was something that I think it took my family a little bit to wrap their head around. I don't know about your family, but we're very lucky that we have very supportive parents and family. But I think the idea of pursuing this kind of unorthodox path is something that people not frown upon, but people don't fully understand. And I think that was kind of my moment where I understood that I could do this for the rest of my life. Yeah.
What did you upload to YouTube?
So yeah,
my video of him twerking.
Exactly.
It went viral. Yeah,
that was it. Yeah, it was. I actually for about 1.5 to 2 years, I kind of built this organic fan base just doing cover videos. So I worked with a studio out here in New York, and my best friend Matt filmed all of our videos. Which full circle, what's really cool is Matt is still the guy filming all the Fly by Midnight videos, and
he actually started a company recently too called Knox Media that's killing it. And they work with artists like Black Coffee, Chelsea Cutler, stuff like that. So it's really cool.
Yeah, so we've kind of like built this kind of a veer off that question, but we've kind of built this creative family around us that have been like with me from the beginning, but also now with Fly by Midnight from the beginning. Started a fan base doing cover videos and was starting to make pretty good money off of that. Yeah.
Interesting. That must have been pretty validating to kind of see like the AdSense checks come in, but also have that fan base kind of grow, right?
Yeah, and it was a story Slavo and I like telling too is when Slavo and I decided to start Fly by Midnight. I was like, hey, I have this fan base that has gotten used to me singing other people's songs, and I'm confident if I put out an original of my own, it's just not going to land the way I want it to because people see me in a certain light. So half of the struggle of starting Fly by Midnight was, will people even care if I'm personally doing an original song? From there, we figured out that new fans came on board and old fans of my project left, and some stuck around, and we really created something from the beginning that was just completely different than what I had done before, which was really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So when you guys met, Slavo, were you still in Florida, or had moved to New York at that point?
I actually moved to New York, I think, maybe like a year or two before I met you, because I did this apprenticeship thing that was in the city for like 2 years. So I guess it must have been 2 years. And then I was living on Staten Island, so I was close by. But yeah, we didn't meet until probably 2 years in.
Yeah.
Okay. So take me from there. When you guys met, was it like you guys clicked from the beginning and you knew that you both kind of would work well together, or how'd that relationship evolve?
Brothers at first sight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When was the first time I met? Was at a show?
So he actually, it's funny because the studio that we work at is called ET Studio Productions. I reached out to them because a mutual friend kind of thing, and they were the ones working with Justin. And so as a producer, I came on board. They were like, we have this artist, Justin Bryte, who's starting to do original music. Would you be interested in working with him? I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, at this point, I obviously wouldn't say no to anyone. I'm just kind of starting up. And he had a show they called, what is it? Back to the Beach or something like that on Staten Island?
It was like some outside Staten Island performance. Quite cringeworthy.
And so the first time I met him, he was wearing like a tank top. He had like your typical like Ray-Ban wafer sunglasses on. And I was like, oh my gosh, who is this kid? And no, he was really genuine, dude. Very passionate. You could tell from the start, And we got in the studio probably like a week or two later.
Yeah, I was super excited to work with Slavo too. Just a new creative person, especially being in Staten Island. There's not a lot of people really taking music seriously. Mm-hmm. And when we were introduced to each other, it was like, hey, you two, you don't really know each other. Get in the room and make some music. And we kind of went in writing a song with no expectations, no guidance, no idea what we wanted it to sound like. We just wrote, and we kind of left that session with the first Fly by Midnight song. Yeah.
I feel like that's the story behind a lot of stuff where it's like, we're just going to go in and see what happens, and maybe magic happens. And
for sure. And the one thing that we like to add to that story, I feel bad that we're talking so much.
Oh, no, you're good.
When we wrote that song, we actually weren't even a duo at the time. So it was like one of those things that song kind of created Fly by Midnight. It was very inspiring. And Justin at the time, I remember, was looking for some kind of change in his artist project. I think he was looking for even like a female artist to join as a duo.
Yeah.
Whenever we wrote that song and it just clicked. We just kind of, I guess, both had the epiphany, or you had the epiphany and brought it to me. I was like, yo, you want to do this as like a duo? And I was like, yeah, it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, something about us, our personalities, is I'm definitely a bit more eccentric, and Slavo's more kind of chill, go with the flow. And when I brought the idea to him, it was like it was like the most epic thing in the world that popped into my mind. And I was like, hey man, we're gonna do it. We're gonna take over the world. It's gonna be crazy.
The theater side for sure.
Exactly, my theater side was bleeding through. And Slavo like shrugged his shoulders and he was like, all right, cool.
You said something a little bit ago where you just like you were in the mode of you're new in the industry a little bit and you're kind of like don't say no to anyone. So is that something that you still kind of think of like a mantra or something that's useful to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think we're at a point right now either, to where we need to turn stuff away. But there's sometimes when the schedule gets a little crazy that, we'll pick and choose. But I don't think we'll ever have an ego to where, there's someone we won't work with because, they're below us. You know what I mean? I don't think it's ever that. It's more of at this point in our life, just organizing things and staying on top of what, our priorities are. So,
yeah. And just to add to that, this past year, we've been lucky enough, obviously continuing to release Fly By Midnight music, but we've been lucky enough to write and produce for other artists as well. And some of the artists we've worked with that have had the most successful singles this year are not artists with the biggest fan base. You really don't know anymore. And we pretty much work with people that we believe in, from the business side to the creative side. If we share the same values with them and we think they're amazing, we want to work with them. So,
and that pretty quick too, working with people. You get in a room and either you gel or you don't. So
yeah.
Yeah, and that can be a pretty good springboard, it seems like, working with someone and creating that network. And when one person pops off, it lifts everyone up. That's the rising tide that lifts all ships, I guess, is the idiom.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, I mean, what's it been like for the past couple of years? You guys working together, growing the fan base. I mean, you have 200,000 plus monthly listeners on Spotify, 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. So, what's gotten you guys there?
It's a combination of a lot of things. I think we started off Fly By Midnight as a YouTube project. Being that, like previously, my fan base had kind of lived on there, we thought that was the best place to start. And then very quickly early on, we kind of figured that if we were going to have longevity, we needed to make this first and foremost a live band. It needed to have this live organic presence because we know that sometimes numbers on a page don't necessarily equate to warm bodies in an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our first and foremost pivot. We were like, all right, we're releasing videos that are doing really well. Let's bring that on the road. So we played New York, we played LA. We've been lucky enough last year, we went on a tour that, was it like over 50 colleges? Or
yeah, it was a lot of schools.
A lot of schools. We were on the road for like maybe about 2 months or so. And that was the first time Slavo and I were on top of each other 24/7, which was cool. We only wanted to kill each other twice. And then from there, we then realized that YouTube wasn't the end all be all. And we wanted to move over to Spotify. And it's just kind of been this ride of experimenting and not being afraid to take risks sonically, while also creatively and strategically just doing things that maybe are a little bit left of center. Is there anything you'd add to that? Or?
Yeah, I guess I would just say from the beginning, it's been a journey, that's for sure. But there's no playbooks from the start. It's always been a learn from, our surroundings and kind of learn as we go. And I think we have a pretty good head on our shoulders at this point, but it's never been a sure process. It's kind of tried and true and just see what works for us. And I mean, at one point we were full on covers and now we're full on original music. You know what I mean? So pretty drastic to keep our fan base through, a transition like that. We still have a lot to learn. So,
yep.
Yeah, certainly. It must be fun to grow. And I'm really curious about your guys' experience kind of with this new music industry because, I mean, you guys said it started as a YouTube project and that's kind of like the bleeding edge of the music industry. Maybe not YouTube these days, but maybe SoundCloud. Yeah. It depends on what genre, I suppose. But, you're connecting with individual people that are clicking on your video because they like your music. And you're not 10 years ago when you're trying to get a record, I mean, not a record company, but a radio station to play your music. So it's you're really on these getting the early adopters and building the fan base from there. So when you guys how do you guys approach music, trying to find the single that's going to connect with each and every person that's a YouTube subscriber or that's following you on Spotify or whatever? Like, are you looking at trends, or is it the same kind of thing of you just go in the studio and see what happens?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, for us, fans are like the first and foremost thing why we're doing what we're doing. But I think the only time we don't necessarily think of the fans first is when we're creating music, because in my opinion, the fans are invested in the kind of music that we want to make, if that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go into the studio, it's never like, man, will the fans love this? I think the fans have kind of trusted our instinct and what we're inspired by, which constantly changes. I mean, before Slavo and I are artists, we're fans of music first, and we're constantly listening to new music, old music, and incorporating all of that. So I think a majority of this past year has been going into the studio with other co-writers and just really experimenting and trying all different stuff, which I think you'll see on the next record. It's definitely super eclectic. So
Anything to add to that, Slavo?
Yeah, I would just say that, you mentioned how to pick a single and stuff like that. It's so funny, the industry we live in these days, everything we pretty much put out is a single, that's how we treat it. We have the goal at the end of each project to, tell a story in a certain way, but put it all together at the end of it. And, the last album we did, we added, I don't even know how many extra songs when we released it, maybe 3 extra songs.
yeah.
And we kind of plan on doing something similar here. Yeah, every time just trying to change up the formula. And I think this album was the trips to LA and really trying to grow as me being a producer and, us both as songwriters and working with people that we think understand what we're trying to say. And yeah, I think the people we worked with brought a nice little difference to, what we've been doing in a good way, obviously.
Yeah.
Speaking of you're the producer and Justin's more the songwriter. What are your roles within the duo? Because I know a lot of people are maybe they collaborate with someone, but they're not always working with someone, or they always have that division of labor. So what's it look like for you guys?
It's definitely a unique relationship, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was obvious from the get-go that Justin was very passionate about like the marketing and business side in general when it came to just music in general, other than obviously songwriting. But yeah, I'm usually have my face buried in the computer doing some kind of production stuff, and Justin's coming up with some kind of master plan on how to make everything pop off. So that's usually the dynamic. We're very like hands-on creatively in general, though. I mean, from the videos to the album artworks, everything that you see is like 100% with a touch of people here and there, but it's usually 100% us.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I would say that recently I actually there's a boy band called Brockhampton they call themselves like a collective, just for like full 360 from the visual to the audio. And I was kind of watching an interview of them, and I was like, man, we resonate and connect with them so much, because I feel like fans of our music sometimes, because they're just listening on Spotify, they don't even know that we are the director behind every video. Slavo is editing every video while Slavo is working on the production, coming up with this whole business plan of how to release it, and from the creative side, we both write everything together. It's definitely not like one of us is more of a writer than the other. One of us may come in with the idea for the day, and then we kind of rely on the other one to bring it to life. It's definitely super organic and just 50-50 across the board.
Yeah, that's cool. Interesting. Justin, you're approaching this kind of how a lot of new music people are approaching it, as your music's more of a business as opposed to we're just the creatives. We're going to make the music and then someone else is going to make it go. What are your business plans, as far as getting these things out there, getting people listening to them, getting them into the right hands on playlists, etc.?
It's interesting because I think Slavo just touched on this before, but we're constantly experimenting, and I think we're still doing that. I think we've been lucky enough the past year to start getting editorial support from Spotify, and it's so funny. A lot of people in our circle are like, how did you get this? How did you get that? And how did you get the article on Forbes? How did you do this? And truthfully, it is as grassroots and cold as you can imagine. It's been a matter of emailing the CEO of X, or running into a person at the bar who has a friend who did that. Everything we've been able to accomplish has really been just bottom level, which sounds like a really shit business plan. But truthfully, it really, for me, for every song we release, I have a doc where I have the top things that I want to achieve that are probably out of our league, and I'm aiming to probably accomplish one of them. Then I have like 50 other things that I know we're going to be able to accomplish. And then I bullet point how we're going to figure it out. I don't know if that's a little bit of a vague answer, but
No, definitely not. And it's interesting. I'm always curious about it because we had another independent artist on a few episodes ago, and he was talking about he had been independent for a few years, and his method was to guess the email address of the curators on Spotify and Apple Music, and just once he found an email address that didn't get immediately sent back as wrong, he would just bombard them with their music, and eventually got on a playlist, and that was like, the kind of the rocket fuel that set him off. So I'm always curious about how people do it, So it's interesting to hear that you have this list that you got your reach goals and then the achievable stuff that you're working down. So
I think cool. The timing with music is really important too in general, and like the yin and yang between the business and the creative, because like the perfect example, like I was just thinking about, is the Old Town Road deal, where like I think that song is genuinely a good song. If it wasn't a good song, or at least like quality wise, you know what I mean? Like there's certain things that I feel like people will expect to blow up because they had this perfect plan, but the song just isn't right. You know what I mean? And I think that was a perfect storm for him. And not that we're trying to have a viral sensation song like that, which would be nice. But yeah, I think the timing and the right song, the right time of year, the right plan, I think it's very important. And I think we've had songs that have done really well that we've kind of tapped into that, like, how close we can get to being a perfect release. But then there's songs where we've learned from, that don't do as well. And we had a point in our career where we were releasing songs and everyone was doing better and better and better. And then we had a song once where it didn't do as well. And it was like kind of an eye opener to us to be like, wow, okay, so we can, learn from this and reflect and figure out like, what could we do better next time? But it's funny because being the creatives and thinking so business minded like that, I think it's stubborn not to do that these days, but it's also an unfortunate necessity, I think, these days, if you're an independent artist.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. When you guys are talking about this year, you're going around co-writing with people, collaborating, and kind of experimenting. How are you guys getting linked in with these people? Are they connecting with you? Are they reaching out? Are you reaching out? Like, how does that work?
Power of the internet.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the exciting thing. So before we were in LA more than we were in New York this year. That was like a big step for us too. We were like, all right, well, we made a lot of money on this college tour. Either we're going to live a little bit lavish for a few months, or we're going to spend all of it going to LA and, further propelling what we're doing. So we spent all of it. So we had our manager reach out to a lot of other producers and writers and their managers. And truthfully, a majority of those emails never culminated to any sessions, because when you go manager to manager, there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of scheduling issues, etc. So Slavo and I were like, okay, well, let's just start DMing every single person we want to work with on Instagram. And I think 90% of our sessions were literally just messaging people through Instagram, being like, hey, we love your music. And a majority of the time it was like, whoa, no way, we just heard your song too. This is crazy. What are the odds? And actually, not to talk down managers in general, but there were even a couple of situations where our manager and another manager couldn't come to terms on getting in a writing session. And we were so frustrated that we actually reached out to that same artist and got in a session with them. And both of our managers were confused how it even happened. So yeah.
More often than not, you'll see that artist to artist is the way to go. I mean, it's just... Yeah. We're the biggest testament of it, so
for sure.
As a growing artist or songwriter, keeping royalties coming in is important for keeping the bills paid. It's also important to keep an eye on those royalty payments. A lot of people we worked with here at Royalty Exchange were having a tough time making sense of the royalties that are getting paid. So we built a free tool called Know Your Worth that automatically analyzes every royalty payment made on your music. It breaks it all down in an easy-to-understand analysis with some insights that would be impossible to find elsewhere. Plus, it connects you with the thousands of investors on Royalty Exchange and allows them to make you offers on your music. So far, musicians have raised over $1 million for new projects, new ventures, and a whole lot of other things just through the Know Your Worth app. If you're earning royalties, you should be keeping track of them, and Know Your Worth makes it easy. It only takes about 3 minutes to connect an account, and the tool will automatically update over time. Just visit worth.royaltyexchange.com or find the link in the show notes to get started. Now, let's get back to the interview. So when you guys got off that tour with the college tour and you had some money in your pockets, like, how did you guys approach the decision of, do we live lavishly? Do we go, get some nice clothes or something? Or do we like reinvest it in this, maybe it's not a business, but it's like our artistry. Like, how did you guys approach making that trade-off there?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer. That's always been our mentality, just kind of reinvest in ourselves. And it was nice to see a little money come in. I think it was, if anything, motivating, that we're doing something right. So yeah, I think it was a pretty easy decision. We don't really have a conversation about it. I think it was just kind of assumed that, we'd be doing something different. And one thing to say, it's funny talking about managers. The one positive thing that I think, not the one positive thing, there's a million positive things. I'm wording this terribly, but our manager has always pushed us, to try different things and not be afraid of, spending our money on ourselves and reinvesting and blah, blah, blah. And he was the one that really pushed for us to go to LA. And even when we got back, we spent, 3 months there? Yeah. We had such productivity that he's like, you guys realize you have to go back. And we're like, what? Like, we're like running low on all the money we just made.
We literally had just got back and he was like, wait, do you understand what you guys accomplished these 3 months? You have to go back for like another 4 months. And we were like, all right. But
the best part was, even after that trip, he's like, all right, we got to go back again. We're like, all right, relax. We literally have no money. You're going to pay for it?
Yeah, exactly. And talking about managers and business too, when our manager Will stepped on, the one thing was he saw us operating like a business, obviously a creative business, but he was like, hey, let's make this a legitimate business. So Fly By Midnight is an LLC. We treat it with that mentality. And I think that's also kind of what propelled the LA trip to make a lot of sense for us. Like, this is, if you're investing in the product and you want to see the product grow, you have to do it,
So like, it's good to have that manager there to give you that guidance on stuff that maybe, you wouldn't have thought of. Like, maybe do we really incorporate? I know it's not a corporation, but it's good to have him there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You're speaking about our manager, Will? I'm sorry.
Yeah, or just managers in general, like, how they can really be an asset to you as an artist.
I think they're extremely important. I mean, we get so caught up in our own little opinions between the two of us, which is, the end all be all, that's for sure. But, having that third brain, outside of, the studio every day, and someone we can rely on, when we kind of get in these frustrating moments where we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So it's definitely nice to have a manager for sure.
I think early on with Fly By Midnight, after our first song, we were grateful enough to be starting to take manager meetings, and they were knocking on our door. And a big thing we saw from the get-go was a lot of managers wanted to come in and put their hands on everything and start moving pieces around. And with our manager now, and we've been with him probably almost 2 years now, right? He came on not as a manager. He came on as a dude who loved what we were doing, and he wanted to see how he could add value to it, and without changing anything. And that's kind of why, like, we just touched on how maybe his emails to other managers didn't work. So he was always, and he's always been like, hey, I think you should just message that person, or just very, very hands off and knowing when to step up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he's not going to get offended if you are doing something that might be originally classified as his role.
For sure.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, it's interesting to hear about that, because we don't really hear about the managers too often on the show, but it's cool to hear about the experience. Cool. So you guys got this album, or I guess it is an album and a single coming up here soon. So what's on your business plan for this, Justin?
Yeah, so the single is supposed to come out October 23rd. I guess, I don't know, maybe it'll be out by the time this podcast sees the world. But it's a song that we've kind of had in our pocket for a while. We wrote it during our first trip to LA. Mm-hmm. And it's called Love Me Like a Friend. And from the get-go, after writing this, we were like, this has to be one of the focus singles for the album. It's like Slavo said, every song we release is a single in its own right because it's by itself, and we treat it, it has its own visual and everything, but we still need to keep that mentality of a song that we really go 110 miles per hour on. And this song definitely feels like it to us. So we're experimenting right now with different partners and different people we could bring on that kind of just open up a few more doors that we haven't prior. And I think that's all we want to do. With every song we release, we want to just try something even 10% more to try to impact. So that's kind of the plan with this single in particular. And then the album, the album's a whole different monster, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing that I think is really cool for this song specifically, that's kind of a milestone for us, is we're actually releasing overseas.
Yeah, so we just signed a deal with a mainland China distributor. So we've kind of always kind of festered a fan base overseas, but I think this is the first time after looking at analytics that we were like, okay, we have to capitalize on this and not just treat it like it's not happening. So yeah, we recently just signed with a distributor overseas, have a translated artwork, translated video and everything. And so that's really exciting. That's definitely one thing. But even on top of that, that kind of inspired us to for this release in particular, to reach out to different outlets, not only in the States. So we actually have a Premiere Magazine interview going live with the biggest English music magazine in Japan. We're also negotiating a big interview with a fashion magazine in the UK as well. So really just trying to make this feel as global, more global than anything we've ever released before.
Wow. So you guys were looking at analytics of where people are listening to you, and you saw this little fan base in China, and you thought, let's go for it?
Pretty much. It's been, man, we had a viral video in China 2014.
Yeah, it was actually a YouTube cover that we did. We Don't Talk Anymore. It hit on ours maybe 12 million.
Yeah, but I hit
on another channel too. That
there was a re-upload. It was like 30 million, and it was all over their news stations. It was so crazy. Since then, we've kind of felt that, but more recently than ever, we felt it more on the original side of music. And yeah. So we look at the charts, and that kind of motivated that whole decision.
How are you guys Mandarin coming along?
We did a video once for a YouTube video out there that we took maybe 18 takes to try to figure out.
Because they sent us translation. What was it? Ni hao?
That's the easiest thing you can say, I think.
Xie. Well, we're also forgetting, we're not mentioning that we actually went to China too. It was shortly after the video, or?
Yeah, it was, I think, simultaneous, which is ironic.
Yeah. So we went. We were in Shenzhen, and the funny part was this had nothing to do with Fly by Midnight. It was a performance that we were hired for the Chevrolet Malibu, and we just happened to be there. So we learned those two phrases, which it's probably not.
Didn't get us very far.
Yeah, it didn't. Really
There's a funny story in it, which I won't go too into, but we actually went out with all the people we went with one night, and they gave us these cards. And till I get back to the hotel, and somehow we lost them. And then we were looking at each other like, okay, where's everyone? And everyone had left, and we both didn't have our cards. And I don't even know. I think someone finally came out of this random crowd, someone we knew. We're like, please tell me you have the card to get home. So we almost got stuck in Shenzhen.
Yeah, Slavo's leaving out the fact that we met a group of cool people. We're like, you guys got to come back to the hotel.
We were trying to throw a party.
We're throwing a party. So then we gave them our cards like idiots. So they would know where to go, and we didn't know where to go.
I think we assumed one or the other would keep the card, and we just both,
Yeah, that describes a typical night out with us. Yeah.
So next time, more cards.
Yeah,
still have the party at the hotel. They were probably pretty disappointed if they got to the hotel and there was nothing there for them.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That's crazy though that you got this little viral hit in China and just happened to be at the same time. Which another thing I want to talk about is the timing, because it's like you say you wrote this song that's going to be the single a couple months ago, or more than that maybe. How do you hold off from just wanting to be like, well, let's just get it out there and see what the world thinks about it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because early on when we started Fly by Midnight, where maybe we didn't have as much of a business perspective, it was write the song, produce the song, We're excited. Let's press the button and get it out to the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've seen this past year, because we wrote the single in January. Like we've had it in our pocket for a while. And I think we've realized that with certain songs, you need to pocket them and you need to figure out the rest of the journey before kind of releasing them. I guess the best example of that would be a single off of our last album, You Belong. I'll let Slavo kind of, I guess, touch on that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, the story behind that song's funny because the song came out, I think, 2 weeks before our last album. And Justin was doing his typical thing where he just like kind of sending it out to people, kind of similar to the story you had mentioned about the artist who was sending stuff to Spotify, random emails. Justin had found an email for the head of Pop at Apple Music, sent it over to him just to kind of see what he was thinking of the music we were making and stuff. And he immediately got back and said, wow, this is a bop. And that was like kind of where he left it at. And so Justin had this moment where he'd like pull back from the computer. He looked at me, he's like, wow, he actually got back. How do we take advantage of this and create a relationship with this guy who's doing the music over there? So, weeks had gone by and the album was getting closer and closer. And I think he knew that the album was coming out on the 18th of November or something like that.
Yeah. And just to touch on this, the song that we sent over was one that we had in our pocket for well over maybe a year and a half.
That was probably the longest, that we'd had stored away.
Yeah.
But, essentially, Justin had been going back and forth with him. And he's like, I really like the song. I want to talk and meet and talk about the album. When can you guys get together? And the album was coming out, I think, like a day or two after.
It was 2 days from there. And he said, can you meet tomorrow? And we were on the ferry at the time. And I was like, yeah, of course we can meet tomorrow, thinking he was in New York. And then he sent an address for LA. And and that was one of those, literally, I think if this moment describes Fly By Midnight in itself and our hustle and our drive, because we went from the ferry to JFK, hopped on an overnight flight to Los Angeles in the same clothes we were wearing, brushed our teeth in Starbucks, and took bird scooters over to Apple Music's headquarters to play the album.
Huh.
And that was that really led to the success of that song off the album. So yeah,
that's awesome. Bird's really empowering everyone.
Yeah.
Bird scooters are great, by the way. Shout out Bird.
Yeah, shout out Bird. Give us money.
Be safe on them, but they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank God for Bird for getting you to that meeting. Oh, that's awesome, though. It's like, just it all came together so quickly. That's pretty cool.
Do you guys have birds in Denver?
We do. There are birds here.
They don't have
birds
them in New York.
Yeah, we don't have them in New York. I can see why you don't.
I feel
have
like they'd be very
York.
dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not a great idea yet.
Yeah, I think there was a guy that works here that got ran over the other day on a bird scooter.
Wow.
But,
well, tell him not to do that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Stay out of the cars. That's cool. Though. So, like, what do you guys still have a relationship with this head of Pop at Apple?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been one of those. It's such a because you hear about Spotify curators or curators in general with favoritism, and I think we walk a line of not favoritism but a genuine relationship, even as producer and writers, where we've met him out and people from Apple Music and Spotify out of places, and they're like, "Hey, you should write for this other artist." So he's also just been such a guide where it's come for Fly By Midnight as an artist project, but also just genuinely wanting to connect good people together. So yeah, we've maintained the relationship, and it's definitely grown to relationships with other people in the industry as well.
I think the one thing about him specifically too is you could tell how passionate he is about pop music specifically. And for us being pop artists, it's tough to find that these days. And he just really wants the best music possible to come out in the world. I think it's very flattering for us that he pushes us to different people as much as he does, just to work with, collaborate with. And I think for him, it's a little selfish in the respect that he wants, great pop music. So
yeah,
which we're okay with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course. So speaking of pop, how did you guys land on that as kind of your genre that you're targeting? Is that just a matter of like where your personal taste went, or is that kind of more cognizant decision, or what?
Yeah, I think we both loved pop growing up, even being interested in other genres, right?
Yeah, and it's pop with obviously subgenres for us specifically, but all encompassing pop, and we're inspired by, like I was saying before, I used to listen to screamo rock music, so every now and then there'll be a little electric element, like electric guitar elements, and a little more alternative sounding stuff that we do. Yeah, we get a little more indie with it sometimes, where we experiment, and I don't think for us it's ever straightforward. And I think in the industry these days too, in general, like I was just listening to Camila Cabello's new song. Did you hear that yet?
Not in here yet.
It's crazy because Ryan Tedder, I think, worked on it with Louis Bell and then Frank Dukes, and they're all like, Louis Bell's obviously known for Post Malone. Ryan Tedder is known for his project, and the song that came out of it was just like, it's kind of rock. It's like almost like rock and roll, and even like
Cool.
Niall Horan's new songs. Have you heard that? It's like pretty rock and roll. So like,
Yeah.
I think the term pop is obviously, like I said before, all encompassing. Who knows what that even means these days?
For sure. And just to touch on our influences, I mean, coming into Fly By Midnight, I always listened to a lot of 80s pop growing up, from like Toto to The Outfield, and that's kind of always been my go-to. And I know Slavo like loves Billy Joel, and from you definitely hear that kind of lyric inspiration. So we're really like a melting pot of so many different genres.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's coming next after this? You get your album out and the single. Do you have any more tours coming up, or what's the next step for you guys?
Yeah, so that's the exciting part too. Whenever we release an album, we always want a tour to follow in some capacity. This time it's a little bit different because we're actually playing a New York, LA show with this band called Loote that I've seen this tremendous success the past 2 years. And so we're going to be supporting them for these shows coming up. And we're really excited about that. And probably after that, go back to headlining a few shows of ours as well.
Nice. Do you guys find time to like create new music when you're on tour, or is it kind of like some lost time as far as like new stuff for you guys, or what's up with that?
It's tough because I feel like we'd love to be, and we kind of are built to be the on the road creatives, but it's for us. I feel like we never really have done that. It's always been like, whether we're in LA, stationed somewhere doing stuff. I mean, I have a rig that I bring around with us, but or back home, when we were doing our college tour, maybe we picked up the guitar a couple times, tried to write something, and I don't know why.
Yeah, the only time that I think we really went in while on tour was we were talking about that song off the last album that did like really open doors for us, and we were in Wisconsin during the tour for like 3 days, and we had like 2 days off. And actually, we rented a studio in Wisconsin in this random small
a lot of cheese curds.
A lot of cheese curds in this small town, and that was where we effectively finished the song. So yeah, I feel like we're so focused on the live show, and we want that to continue to grow, that when we're on tour, we're constantly thinking in that headspace, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. You want the people that come to the show to tell 10 friends about how awesome the show was, and grow from there.
For sure, yeah. And our live show is like, it's interesting because you, like we touched on this before, but you hear a song on Spotify and you don't know much about the artist. You watch a video and you don't know what their live show looks like. And for us, it's like a completely different experience. Mm-hmm. It's a real live show. Slavo's playing guitar, I'm playing keys, we're both singing. We bring a drummer on, sometimes a bass player. It's really, it's super tight, super energetic. And really, it's like it's a community experience. You're not watching a show; you're really part of something. So
that's cool. I know it takes a lot of energy to do that stuff, so it makes sense that it's starting to pay off a little bit. Cool. This might be more of an amorphous question for you guys, or something that you have to dig deep for. But if you had to go back, knowing what you know now, and like if you were to do it again from the beginning, what would you do differently, would you say, if anything?
I think someone asked us this recently, actually, but so we're slightly prepared. The one thing that I always think about in terms of that like style of question is just like, not the cliche of I wouldn't change anything, more of like, just kind of trust your gut and don't second guess yourself so much, because I feel like at the beginning we had so much pressure on, we wanted everything to do so well. Yep. That we would second guess ourselves. We wouldn't release things for that reason. And I think just to have more trust in the process.
Yeah, I would just tell, and I think this is a bit more specific to me, because I've always been so proud creatively of what we've done from day one and our evolution. At the time, like felt like why is this not happening? But it's been so organic, and I literally think exactly how it was meant to be. But I think from the business perspective, just figuring out earlier on that everything is attainable. Like if we've not to dive too much into this, but this past year, if we want to get a song to someone and it felt so out of this world, we've received responses telling us no from the biggest people in the industry, but they've gotten back to us. And I think I wish I would have figured that out a bit sooner.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. It's always nice to hear a different perspective on the music industry from indies like Justin and Slavo. Of course, their story is getting less and less unique these days, with more people finding a way into the industry on their own. If you have anyone that you think we should feature on the podcast or chat with, tag them in a tweet, let us know, drop us an email. We'd love to chat with them. Until then, we'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Take care.